Good evening. So we're going to kick off our meeting. It's exactly 6 o'clock. So we'll start off with a roll call. So Mary Fossey, she's actually out sick today. John Monroe.
Here.
Kari Quas.
Here.
Julius Wilson.
Here.
Ben Young. I think he must be on his way. Chris Gray.
Present.
Ethel McNeil.
Here.
Jim Lingus.
Here.
Simone Tarver. Here. And so we'll start with approving our minutes. And so that should be attached in our packet. So I move to approve them as they are in our packet.
Second.
And so all in favor, we have to go around. Oh, perfect. Perfect. So all in favor of approving the minutes as they are in our packet? And I think we have to go around. So John Monroe?
Yes.
Kari Quas?
Yes.
Julius Wilson?
Yes.
Ben Young?
Yes.
Chris Gray?
Yes.
Ethel McNeil?
Yes.
Jim Lingus? And Simone Tarver, yes. Perfect. So we'll move on to chair comments. So the goal for our meeting tonight is to nail down our 5 district core areas, and that will allow Tony to create draft maps that will reflect the input of our commission. I know there's been a lot of information distributed at this meeting, but the goal today is to pick the core areas. So after staff comments, we'll have a few minutes to ask questions about the profile document, and these questions should be clarifying questions, and we shouldn't get into a full discussion at that time. So we'll move on to staff comments.
I just want to draw attention to a couple of new documents that were not provided to you guys on Friday, which is this memo, which has a lot of great information in it, and next steps, which we'll kind of go over at the end of the meeting. But I do want you to bring this to your attention, along with these 2 maps that are stapled together weird. I don't know what the copy machine was doing, but they stapled at the bottom, which line up to the Excel sheet that I printed out for you, which they kind of, this one has the numbers so you can see on the Excel sheet where that lines up on this map for the core conversations discussion, which is item 2 on the agenda. And so I think before we get started, I'd like to give everyone just a second to review this document that Tony printed, or that he provided for us today. So take a couple minutes. I'm going to get sorted, and then we will start on item 1, and then go from there. Right. Tony, let's do a quick sound test while people are finishing up. Can you hear us okay? You're a little quiet.
Is it better?
Yep, you're online. Thank you. Okay, so let's get started. So we have 10 minutes to ask questions about the neighborhood demographic districting commission document that was provided. It's really big and comprehensive, so 10 minutes to kind of better understand that, and that information should kind of support our core areas conversation. But it's not a document that we're, really discussing too much today. It's mostly just to help us understand those core areas and the makeup of Everett, so that everyone has the same information going into this conversation, and no one's kind of substantially more educated than someone else on the demographics and what we've got going on in this community. So we'll just open it up and get started right now.
Would you like for me to give an explanation or some description of the profile?
Great. I think that's a great place to start. And then we'll get Chris's question first.
Okay. In essence, what I put together are the demographic, socioeconomic, and lifestyle, what they call lifestyle attributes of the city. And this is done in order to better understand different areas of the city. One of the common practices of districting is putting districts that have some commonality amongst them, not just actually moving territory that aren't significant to each other. And so this will give us an idea of the neighborhoods and where they stand in various socioeconomic attributes. It's not wholly complete, but I didn't want to inundate you all with dozens and dozens of variables that really would bog you down. But they're the most commonly used sort of socioeconomic variables. There are some that we can add to it, by the way. It's you can view it as a living sort of document. Let's not hamstring ourselves. If there's information that we can add, let's add information to it. One thing about the Esri lifestyle, which is I haggled with myself deciding whether I wanted to put it in there or not. But it does give sort of an overall sort of integrated aspect of demographic, socioeconomic, and lifestyle all integrated into one sort of category. We can use it or we don't use it. Sometimes it's a little confusing, but it's just another piece of data that we use to assist us in making decisions. And I used a tool from Esri, which is the largest GIS company, to enrich the neighborhood data essentially to come up with this. And so hundreds and thousands of businesses use this service all the time. So any questions pertaining to the overall profile?
Yeah, previously we discussed that a few of the neighborhoods have non-city geographic areas in them. In these statistics, did you, like for example, Silver Lake, did you include the statistics for that entire shaded region or the city portion of that neighborhood?
I caught part of it. I didn't catch the whole thing. I think you said, did I include a portion of the neighborhoods that you originally discussed? Could you repeat your question?
Certain neighborhoods have a city boundary as well as some county areas. So for example,
Yes.
Silver Lake. So I was just asking if your statistics included the city portion or the entire shaded area.
Very excellent question. The enrichment process includes the entire neighborhood. So not just the portion that is contained within the city. it includes the city and the county boundaries. I'd have to do a separate process to actually do that. And I could do it, it just takes a little time to isolate and segment out that, the city portion, if you like. Yes, Commissioner.
One of the areas that I thought was rather interesting, and I think you may want to check the data, is the median year built for housing, in particular the Delta neighborhood. It's surrounded by a 1940, a 1944, and a 1940. And yet Delta shows as 1978 one of the, quote, newer neighborhoods, which really surprised me. And then when you contrast that to that last really interesting chart that you threw in, that has to do with the ESRI tapestry segmentation, that particular neighborhood is shown as the social security set. And it just seems strange that you have the social security set living in one of our newer neighborhoods. There's something that just seemed out of balance there.
Right, right. Um, and, I looked at that. It looked odd to me too, how that was actually a more recent year than others. And I think what is going on is, if you think about it, this is all structures. It's not just housing structures, but also includes apartment buildings. So if you consider apartment complexes, most likely those apartment complexes are newer than the housing structures that are there. So they're going to actually skew and give you a little more recent uh, medium year structure built than those that don't have apartment complexes, if you can follow what I'm saying. So that's probably skewing the results. Um, so we may and may not want to utilize that. We may want to, once I saw that, I thought, let me go a little deeper. So I plan on pulling sort of block group level data from the ACS and just taking a look at that. It's older data, but nonetheless, let's take a look at it and see how that compares and matches up. Um, the other one, what was your second question? I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it was all tied to that because that same neighborhood was the Social Security neighborhood, which gave me the impression it was a much older, more mature neighborhood, if it's the
Correct.
Social
Correct.
Security set.
Right.
Yeah, so I'd appreciate if you could just take another look. It really is one of the older neighborhoods. It's the old, what we used to refer to as the housing project, built during World War II timeframe. That's a big chunk of
Right.
what's up there. So but now after you've mentioned the apartment, that may be part of what's skewing it. But so thank you.
Right. I think that probably is what's skewing the results. And the demographic may be still an older demographic, but the structures there may be skewed because of the apartments that are there.
I would jump in to agree with you on that, that there are a lot of newer apartments. A lot of it is senior housing. So there's a conglomerate of people that who be on Social Security living in a senior housing, very new building. So thanks.
Uh, Excellent, excellent. Yes, sir.
Is there any way you can show numbers to back this theory of yours that is because of the apartments and things like that? Because this is a theory. 'Cause I haven't seen any numbers backing what you're saying is the reason why it's skewed.
Right, right. One of the things I was going to do was putting the percentage of renting, if you will. That may give us some idea of the percentage. If it's a higher percent than normal, that'll give us some idea. I can look at some other variables to actually see, maybe there's somewhere I can break out the structure. Maybe not with the enrichment program, but with the census program, census data. I can maybe look at what are the structures there that may be multi dwellings, and that gives you an idea. You see a high percentage of multi dwellings, that's a good indication that it's either apartments or condos or something like that. So I'll make a note and then I'll come back next month and I'll give you guys a report on that.
Appreciate it.
Definitely. Any other questions?
It looks like people are kind of like looking back at the map, so I'm just gonna give, we still have about 4 more minutes on this, so no rush.
Well, Tony, I want to make sure that I understand what you're asking us to do in the next allocation of time. As I read your memo, you were asking us to identify the 5 core areas. Then, as I understand it, you wanted that identification, if we're able to arrive at those, to be sent to what you referred to as jurisdiction professionals to weigh in on those and provide feedback, as well as the Office of Neighborhoods. And then those would come back to us sometime next month or the month after, and we would take those 5 core areas and expand those, using what your term, into the areas, the
Right, into
redistricting
districts,
areas, the districts. Is that what you're asking us to do?
Yes, and not necessarily 5 areas that you come up with now, 5 to 10. You may come up with 10 areas because you just can't whittle it down. Those would be presented to those other entities, the jurisdictional experts, if you will, legal, professional planning, council of neighborhood.
Right.
And so they would provide feedback, they bring it back to us. We would then take that, whittle those down to 5. So after we get the feedback, whittle it down to 5.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
If that's all the feedback we have, we can move on to item number 2 and start our core areas discussion. Tony, do you want to kick that off?
Yes. And this, I guess, let me show my screen, or share my screen if I can.
What document should we have in front of us, Tony?
You should be looking at either the blank, you should have the blank map like you see on the screen here, or the one with all of the labels on it. And these are the core, suggested cores that you all have put together. And so that blank, or that rather the map with all the labels are a little cluttered. So I'm not sure if it's better to look at the screen or not, because it is cluttered. But what I want you to do is these are your cores, and so you all will determine the cores. These aren't Tony's cores. These are cores that you reflect that the citizens of Everett would desire to have. And so the purpose of what we want to do is whittle it down to 5 to 10. We may not do it this time. We may need next time to do it, but we want to whittle it down to 5 to 10 core areas of the city. For the first core, I wanted to start up north because I believe that that's an easy one, if you will. So I'm going to begin in the northwest Everett neighborhood. And the first thing I noticed was that the northwest neighborhood, Everett neighborhood, has the most suggestions. We have the waterfront northwest, and if you can see on the screen, what I tried to do is get the general location of those cores. I couldn't get maybe exactly, but I tried to get the general location. We have North Broadway, this is the street that includes Northwest, and then parts of Delta on one side and Northwest on the other. We got the college area, Ava. I put, this is basically using precincts that gathered all the areas that had colleges. Put a pin on that. You have the Everett Community College. There's an area around there, Grand Park. We have the Legion Park, Alverson Boulevard. We've got the Washington State University, Everett Community College University Center. East Marine View Drive up here at the north. And then we have the Northwest neighborhood itself. And so my suggestion is with all of these is that Northwest Everett becomes a core. The entire neighborhood becomes a core. There are so many areas that have been suggested that it's clear to me that this should be a core, this should be one of the core districts itself, or one of the cores of the districts itself. And so that would be my suggestion.
So should we stop and discuss each area as you present it, or should we go through and go through the whole process and do it that way?
Well, if the reason why I suggested making the entire neighborhood a core, which I think we're going to, which each of these cores, remember, we're actually going to probably encompass the entire neighborhood because we want to keep whole neighborhoods intact. So we may state that as a core in area, but we're actually going, when we draw the district, we're actually going to expand to probably the entire neighborhood unless it's split. And so what I'm suggesting is that the entire Northwest neighborhood is a core. That means that we don't have to actually go through any of those. We're stating that that's one of the core districts for this particular plan.
So I guess a lot of the feedback that I received on via email and in your spreadsheets separated Northwest and Delta. And so I guess since we're talking about Northwest, I'm curious if you guys think, I mean, do we need to discuss those differences? Because that would be an interesting split, right? You're going like down the middle of the top of the map. So,
Absolutely.
so
And in essence, that was another item I was going to actually talk about next with the Delta, which is if we look at that north area, let me zoom back, we have two ways of actually creating a district. If we create Northwest Everett as a core and we create Delta as a separate core, then we'll have two districts that run north and south. We have to because of the configurations. Or we create Northwest Everett as a core, and then we expand over to Delta, to Riverside, to Bayside. And so those are two different ways that we can actually envision that the plan would be. What I am originally suggesting right now is that it makes sense to have Northwest Everett as a core, as a district core. We haven't decided yet whether Delta will be part of it, and we can discuss that. But it seems to me that this could be potentially a college district, if you will, or college leaning area, if you will. But again, once again, that's up to you all.
Question. Get back to the criteria. Population, compactness, trying to follow natural boundaries as best as you can, and no islands, no islands. I'm looking at what you're talking about, Northwest Everett, making it a core. The population in that area, if you're trying to get, Tony, you've said we have to use the 2010 census unless it's updated. And if that's accurate, you said there's a standard deviation so that the population in each district needs to be 19,000 something to 20,000 something, 21,000 something. And so within populations of the 5 districts that meet the 19,000 to 21,600, how does Northwest Everett become a core when the population in Northwest Everett is only 5,700? You need to include all four of those neighborhoods from, to be able to, from 19th Avenue,
Right.
actually further than that, from Everett Avenue, to be able to get the population. So please explain when you talk about core, Northwest
Sure.
Everett being its own core, how does that
Sure.
fit in the population criteria?
Sure. The core isn't a complete district. The core is a central portion of the district. And so a core could be only a few blocks. It could be
Okay,
a subdivision that's important, a historic district that has, buildings, structures there that have been there for a long period of time. And so when I say core, I'm saying that's a portion of the districts, but a district. But what we're going to do is we're going to expand the core to create the district. And so what we would do is this would be a core. And just to give you an idea, let's say that that becomes a core. And let's say that we decided that for some reason, Boulevard Bluff becomes a core. And let's say we decided that Valley View becomes a core. And I'm just throwing it out there. They become the core areas of the city that we expand around them to create districts. And so they're the focal point for where we're going to expand the districts. So this core would expand either south here, or it would expand to the Delta, to Riverside, to Bayside. There are a couple different ways it could expand. Then that would create the district. But this is the core. And the purpose of the core, and I probably should have said this, is that there is an aspect of longevity to cores, meaning that when you redraw the boundary lines, usually the core stays intact. All right, so next time, let's say that population has changed and decided to actually redraw the boundaries in a couple of years, new census data out. The District 5, which is Northwest Everett, that district, that neighborhood stays the same inside the district. But now let's say we want to go down to Bayside and Port Gardner and not go to Delta and Riverside. The district would remain with that Northwest neighborhood because it's a core. Okay? So the core is a part of the district that we're going to expand on. And the reason for it is that the courts have ruled that there is some usefulness from having some continuity of districts. So people won't just start creating districts every cycle that goes everywhere. They want districts, unless it's a violation, unless it's dramatic population changes, they like for districts to remain, you know, relatively closely, configured, let's say. There's always reason to change back and forth, but they don't want people to just make up districts every redistricting cycle. And so when I say core, when we decide that Northwest, or if we decide it, then the next cycle, Northwest will probably remain in that district. Delta may not, Riverside may not, but Northwest will be part of that district that we actually create. Does everyone understand that?
Thank you.
Tony, this is Kari. I would agree that Northwest is a core neighborhood of the city, and a core of a district makes sense to me. I would, if Mary was here, she'd already be raising her hand. I believe that Northwest and Delta are very different neighborhoods, even though we interact and well, I really like Mary and her people, and she likes mine, but they're very different based on numbers and diversity and economics and all of that. That to me, that Northwest stays the core to the left or to the west, and Delta would be potentially a core neighborhood or Riverside on the east side, and then we work north-south.
I'd like to make comment on your northwest corridor there. There's a piece that you missed when you kind of zoomed in and you talked about the different elements that were in that northwest corridor, northwest section there. You missed the Providence Regional Health Center. And the reason why that's important is that's not only a hospital for Providence, Seattle Children's, it's also an education center, and it's a significant employment center for the city of Everett. And I think that also helps differentiate what's in that neighborhood, that core, versus the kind of activity and groups that you'll find in the Delta. It's just another major differentiator, the way that I see it.
So I'm looking at this and I'm looking at it based upon population. And I've looked at population and then immediately, once I got the population, I started looking at the population based upon income. And if you were to combine, now this is just me saying this because this is how I look at it. If you were to combine Northwest, Delta, Riverside, and Bayside, those economically challenged neighborhoods would outweigh Northwest if they understood it as such, and they could vote as a block, and anything that Northwest neighborhood said, they could actually vote down. I'm pointing this out because I had never saw the populations themselves until tonight or until a few days ago. And based upon that, I am, although I wouldn't want to call it the Northwest Everett, I would actually want to call it the Delta, because the Delta is the most populated neighborhood in that section. And that is the one that I think should be the core as opposed to the Northwest, even though I know the city council will tell us from elections that the Northwest neighborhood does a lot more voting than any other section in the city.
That's a great point, Ben. Thank you for that perspective. I didn't think of it that way. I hadn't thought of that.
And let me also say that let's not get too far ahead of us with developing the plan. It may be that we will create a district that is Northwest and Delta and Bayside and Riverside. It may be. Or it may be that we don't, and we create Northwest and Bayside, and then we go down to Port Garden. And so right now at this particular moment, what we're trying to do is establish these cores. And so we may establish Delta as a core, as an option. We haven't gotten to that yet. So the first thing is, do we want to establish just Northwest Everett as a core? And then we'll move to Delta and we'll talk whether we want to establish that as a core. Remember, we're trying to get 5 to 10. We're not trying to get 5 yet. Let's get 5 to 10 and then submit these to the next level.
So I think we're mostly in agreement that we do see Northwest as a core area. So are we mostly in agreement that, yeah, maybe do a field vote that I move to have Northwest be one of our core areas. And that wouldn't necessarily mean that Northwest and Delta are going to be combined, but that we're going to consider Northwest a core. So those in favor, just raise your hand. Okay. So for our purposes for now, we're going to consider Northwest to be a core. And now we can move on over to Delta.
Yes. And so over in Delta, we had suggestions of Wiggums, Hollow Park, East Side Broadway, and the entire Delta neighborhood. And so a suggestion was to make the entire Delta neighborhood a district. And so once again, this is your plan. You all tell me, how do you feel about Delta becoming a core? The Delta neighborhoods or any one of these subsections?
Based upon the voices that I've been hearing from that area, I would definitely or highly recommend that Delta be a core. Now that I understand what a core is.
I agree. As Ben said, with Delta being the most populous neighborhood that far north, I think it definitely should be a core.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's also a lot of uniqueness to Delta. One of which, it's the last area that still has mitigation issues that may come to the forefront that wouldn't be part of anybody else's agenda. Environmental mitigation issues with the ASARCO. So yeah, I think there's some uniqueness in there that would allow it to be a separate core area.
So if no one has any strong opposition, do we want to do another field vote to have Delta be another one of our core areas? So all those in favor, raise your hand. Okay. So now we can move south and look at the Bayside Riverside area.
All right. So Bayside, we had two suggestions. We had West Marine Drive, and this is the area that encompasses. And then we had the downtown Everett. And so I grabbed downtown precincts, Everett precincts. Excuse me with the duplication there. And so here's the thing for us to consider. If we make Northwest a core and we make Delta core, should we make one of these, Riverside or Bayside, a core? Now, there is some common sense of having a downtown district. That said, how would we have a downtown district if we had two of these as cores? Maybe we don't decide that now. If you decide that there should be a downtown Everett district, which many jurisdictions have a downtown district, but recognize that that is something to consider. That if we had two districts that have cores, how do we create another district that has a core? We could still label it as one of our 5 or 10, but I wanted to actually add that in there just for consideration. There's a second thing that I want to put in, just to throw that in. There are a significant amount of businesses, I think, in this area. So there is a rationale for actually having a business district as well. So consider that when you think about it.
What's the northbound, the North Street on that district? Does that now encompass all? Does that now encompass all of the new development down at the port?
Let's see.
19th is the line. John 19th Street is the line. It kind of is four corners between Northwest Delta, Bayside, Riverside. So if you think of Lombardi's being about that's about 16th, actually 17th. So really it gets about to the naval base is where you start to see the line. So all of the housing would be north.
Yeah, it looks like that's 19th Street right here. And then the lower area. Zoom out. Pacific. That is specific down there. Or Hewitt. I'm sorry. It's Hewitt Avenue and then 19th Street or 19th Avenue.
We're just whispering about the actual lines of the city, sorry. So it's 19th Street is the north end of Bayside, it goes all the way to the water, and then it goes to Hewitt. So, but what I was saying is that the housing as we know it, going down onto the waterfront, is further north. So it's north of the naval station. So the naval station, you can just see it is just above that line at 19th. So there isn't any housing on that bulb out, where I'm thinking it's saying, I can't read it, but Bayside doesn't include any housing out on the waterfront.
So, what are your desires to include any of these areas or the entire area?
I think I'm most inclined to say we just kind of table the discussion on Bayside, Riverside, and Port Gardner and move to another area that we would consider more of a core, and then move back to any discussion of those ones as either adding them to an area or adding them to an existing core or making them a core once we've discussed some of the other areas that I think we're going to need to do a lot more discussing on.
And the adjacent, so adding areas to cores is a conversation that we'll have at another meeting. We're just trying to, the word that was most impactful for me is I think of them as anchors. That was what was helpful to me. So 5 to 10 anchors throughout the city. So I think Simone has a good point to move to a different area. No one seems completely passionate about this spot, a little confusion. So we should move on.
Yeah, let's consider Port Gardner as a core. It runs from, a little bit of it runs from Hewitt to 41st, but there's a big area from Pacific to 41st. And that's a big area of the city. And the population in Port Gardner is, well, it doesn't matter. We're not talking population right now. But that,
Okay, let's do a field vote. If we're in favor of making Port Gardner core, raise your hand.
Well,
Anyone opposed?
Let me interject something. Most likely, the entire area of Port Gardner will not be able to remain intact. We'll either have to come down on northwest to Bayside to Port Gardner, and maybe even down here if we have these two areas as fours, or we'll put, even with these four together, I believe we'll still have to chop up some Port Gardner. Now we can still consider it a core, but recognize it's not going to be the entire area. So you can still vote on it as a core. Recognize that the only way for it to become core is if we group these together. We can't use it as a core. We cut down here.
We didn't really discuss Port Gardner. That was kind of thrown out there very quickly. Is there a certain part of that neighborhood that's of particular core interest, or literally the entire neighborhood is what's being suggested? Maybe that kind of clarifies what he's describing, which I think we're jumping ahead a little bit through that discussion, but you see what I'm asking?
Exactly.
So could you call it a core if it went the whole area that you're showing there, but exclude that is east of I-5?
Yes. Yes, we could actually say that. Once again, we have to make sure that if we have a district that goes north and south for Northwest and north and south for Delta, it's going to be part of this Northwest district. only way to garner the population. However, if we grab all of these together, then we can take a portion, and that portion could be on the east side, and so we could make that area over here a core for the next district. But we're talking about combining Delta, Northwest, East Side, and Riverside. Okay, and again, we don't have to make complete decisions on this right, but I want you to know the implications of making these things a core.
Ton-
Bayside.
Tony, you said you wanted to put the discussion off until perhaps a little later, but it's apparent when you look at the handout in the neighborhoods that if you extend those neighborhoods if you extend the districts north and south, and you use Broadway as one of the natural boundaries, that you are going to that we are going to end up going all the way from Delta all the way out to possibly Glacier View, Lowell, and Valley View to pick up the population. And you just said, be thinking that if you do take Port Gardner, that you probably are going to bifurcate it, because if you do end up going with Northwest, Bayside, Port Gardner, south to pick up the population, our districts are going to be narrow and long, and my point is, it would be helpful if during the discussion this evening, you were also pointing out some of the challenges potentially that we run into, or that the community runs into when you talk about forgetting the compactness and drawing other boundaries, and instead trying to, there's no way we can pick up the population unless we just move from Delta out to Valley View to make that district a population of 20,000 people. And is that practical? I'm not saying yes or no. I'm just pointing out that while we're having a discussion, we should look at the population and see, when we're talking this evening, talking about core areas, what we really are saying. And
It could be possible, Jim, that we have more than one core area in a district, and that's what it'll end up being. This is kind of the creative preliminary conversation to help Tony understand what we think or you think is important, and what areas we think. And I think bringing numbers into it kind of convolutes the conversation of what we think as people that do social activities and hang out in our communities and things like that feel as our community. And so I think you're right that you kind of can't have one conversation without the other, but this is kind of the creative preliminary groundwork. And so leaving the numbers out of it will help him understand our feelings towards our community.
Well, I'm looking at his numbers. I'm looking what he has in the graphic. And that is really helping me look at what the challenges are for our committee. I know we all want to do the right thing, and we're keeping politics out of it. We're just doing what's best for our city. And as Tony talks us through the core areas, I agree. I won't take any further time on this issue, but and let's get back to the matter of trying to identify our core areas.
And Commissioner, I agree with you. I agree with your analysis. The only difference, I would say, is that the input I'm trying to give is an input without really bringing up exact numbers. But as I mentioned a few minutes ago, I can see that if we split Northwest and Delta, then we're going to have to come through Port Gardner. We're also going to have to come down through Riverside, through Port Gardner, and below for the Delta district. And so it's just something to consider, not at the level that we want to say, we're 5,000 short or 2,000 short, or we need to add that, but it's something to consider for a district. What I envision is that we'll have multiple plans, and we'll have a plan potentially that'll show the district coming in. south, north and south. We'll have another district coming down this way. And we'll have another plan that actually encompasses all of this. And that's the time for us to actually, begin to debate which one is the better plan, or we put them all out there to the public and let the citizens bring input into what we've done. And so I envision that we'll have multiple plans in the end. Some will actually do what I said, north and south. Some will actually encompass Delta and Northwest and Bayside together. But right at this particular moment, we should consider it. It may be a determining factor to say, no, okay, we're not going to make this a district core. Or maybe we say, let's put it in as a district core and weed it out later. So,
Tony, is there any hangout spots that you've seen in Port Gardner, library or a theater, that the people that hang out in the neighborhood the most? A community center or anything like that?
And let me just say this, that what I did was, this is your district cores. So I didn't make any suggestions for this. These are the areas that you all feel, being citizens of Everett, having some attachment to the city and understand the dynamics of the city. So you all are coming up with these district cores, not me. I'm just adding sort of advice of potentially the problems, issues.
For Port Gardner, I don't want to split it, but at the same time, there are 800 and something businesses in this area. And when you work with Broadway as a line to the east of that, it's all businesses, right? And actually right around Broadway is too. When I look at it, I think of Rucker Hill, that's all residential, and you have the residential that runs down to Norton, and then you have a section of Port Gardner that is the apartments downtown, that business district you're talking about, along with Bayside. So I don't see that it would be a problem to split it kind of as you start to move into where truly we're dealing with businesses as opposed to housing.
Do you see any of those areas as cores, Kari?
I see Rucker Hill as a core, Norton neighborhood as a core, but that's all kind of the west of Colby, maybe even, if you're dealing with Port Gardner. I'm thinking of those as little neighborhoods within a very large neighborhood within the city.
And it's all
I, I tend to concur about the businesses. One of the things I did notice was were the enormous amount of businesses in these two neighborhoods as compared to the other ones. So I could see a potential core potentially being here on this half of the of Port Gardner, maybe even a portion of Bayside. But that would probably compel us to put Delta and Northwest together. But that's not a decision to make right at this particular moment. That's for plan development. So I would say yes, make that particular core, maybe wherever you all want to make a dividing line or dividing area,
Tony?
the west part.
I was just going to say, maybe to that business district thing that you're talking about, if that's kind of the core of Bayside Port Gardner, that would be a core area to me, that it really is the downtown of Everett. But that doesn't play with neighborhood lines. So I don't really know if that would be considered a core downtown as opposed to Rucker Hill being a neighborhood, as I think of it. It just happens to also be in a very large neighborhood called Port Gardner. So I would think there's kind of like the downtown area, the business district, and then you have the housing, Rucker Hill, Norton area.
We can have two cores in Port Gardner and then weed that out later. So if the group is in feels like those two areas in that neighborhood are ones we need to highlight, that's perfect. Let's do that, and then come back to that and have that conversation when we're talking a little bit more on the number side, like Jim had said before.
Well, I would propose downtown as a core and Rucker Hill as a core.
Yeah, so there's two cores in Port Gardner that we'll have to discuss later because we still have 6 more areas throughout the city that we can highlight. So it's not like this is taking away our ability to highlight places in South Everett. We're not, almost a half at this point. So I think that's okay. And if we end up with 11, that's okay too.
So if we're all pretty much in agreement, let's do another field vote for creating a Rucker Hill and a downtown core. So raise your hand if you're in favor. Perfect. Okay. So now we can
Excellent.
move south a little bit.
Let's go down. Let's see, there were areas over in Lowell. And so there were 3 areas. I-5 and Lowell, some, how do you pronounce that? Is it Snohomish? Snohomish?
Snohomish.
Snohomish.
Snohomish, gotcha, good. Snohomish. That goes on the east side, and then we have Lowell neighborhood, which is, someone suggested the entire neighborhood. And then we have Riverfront New Community Area, which there's some area, new residential areas there. And so how do you all feel about, how do you all feel about Lowell?
It's part of Lowell County.
And
When you get down that area, that's home.
We're discussing unincorporated Snohomish County surrounding the Lowell neighborhood.
So last I heard that there was one farm. It's in the city of Everett. That farm actually exists within the city of Everett.
Whose farm is that?
We were on that committee with him. It was his parents' farm. The little young 19-year-old kid. It was his parents' farm. Yes,
Reiner.
Reiner. So I think that that small sliver is, I still would, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying I think that the Lowell neighborhood should be the core, because that's a known quantity for the city of Everett.
I agree with Ben. Lowell has its own identity, and it does have new growth and housing, as well as a large economic development, retail and housing project that's going to go in on the old solid waste site. So I agree with Ben.
I believe that the majority of Lowell, except potentially a very small piece, is city of Everett. Yeah, there might be a very small part that identifies as part of the neighborhood that's county, but I'm thinking back to my time before I was on this, before I worked for the city, going door to door, and I feel like the whole neighborhood was on
Well, the
lists.
school district, which is part of it, goes down, a little bit down into that. But after that, it branches off into being part of Snohomish School District. So, and it, that's my concern.
But we also have kids in at Mukilteo that are part of the Everett School District, and so school district boundaries, I am not an expert on, but I can look up what you're asking.
When you say, well, school districts are total, but
Yeah.
I'm worried about county and city. That's my concern.
So just for everyone at home, Ethel's microphone just turned on. It hadn't turned on before, but just concerned that Lowell, part of it might be county, and because of the way that the school districts are
Proportioned out there.
portioned out, we might have some more county area over there than we're aware of. So I will look that up and see.
Okay.
These are, just to tell you, these are the city boundaries that were provided, so.
I agree with Ben on this, that this should be a core area for the reasons mentioned, so.
So if there's no strong opposition, if you're in favor of making Lowell a core area, please raise your hand. Okay, those opposed? Okay, so Lowell will be a core. And so now we'll look at View Ridge.
I'm actually at, View Ridge. Oh, that's right. View Ridge. And so we have two suggestions. Forest Park area and what is that? Hobart Park area. So this is a drive or street road. I think there are houses here that define this area. We have a park right here. Any particular areas and reasons why you want to make this?
I'd jump in to say that View Ridge, and if you keep working kind of along the water there, Harborview, Seahurst, Glenhaven, Boulevard Bluffs, they're all a core area to me in that they are all on Mukilteo Boulevard. They're all dealing with Boeing traffic. They're all dealing with a whole lot of similar cul-de-sac type neighborhoods that they would have a lot in common. So I would propose maybe a core area being those three neighborhoods that kind of follow along the water, if that's possible, if people agree. Boulevard Bluffs all the way, basically almost Mukilteo, Harborview, Seahurst, Glenhaven, and View Ridge Madison. Yeah. Where I think View Ridge Madison breaks out is that when you start to get towards Evergreen Way and you start to get into business districts, it becomes different. But at least the core closer to the water is really just residential housing.
I would agree with that.
I'm concerned when you say that because you say View Ridge Elementary School, that's part of View Ridge, and it's sitting right there in the core part of that area of Everett there, which is Beverly and going down.
But View Ridge goes all the way to the water, to the bluff.
I think we could consider. I think we could consider combining those three. But I think in the long run, I would not be opposed to View Ridge getting split in half. I think there are a couple areas. I think you could, like Kari said, you could make a pretty good case that part of View Ridge kind of splits off and becomes more business. But I would be in support of doing those three as one core area. Is there any strong opposition to this? Or any more discussion wanted? Okay. If you're in favor of combining Boulevard Bluffs, Harborview, Seahurst, and Glenhaven, and the View Ridge Madison neighborhoods, raise your hand. Any opposed? Okay. So we'll combine those three.
Are you tracking all of this, Tony? I'm taking notes as well. I'm just curious if we need to go slower or pause or something for you. We can't see your end of the work there, just your computer screen.
Right. I'm trying to track down. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is our sixth one. Do you have that?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. And this is the three neighborhoods together. Is that the idea?
Yeah. Boulevard Bluffs, Harborview, Seahurst, and Glenhaven, and then View Ridge Madison.
Okay. All right. And we'll compare notes afterwards.
Yeah, we'll debrief later, of course.
All right. Good. All right. That's excellent. We're moving faster than what I thought, because what that means is that We now can eliminate Pinehurst. There is one down here, West Mobile, Kill, T.O.
Muckleteo.
I said that
I know, it's a
Uncle
weird one.
Teal.
And so now we have only 3 areas, well, actually 2 areas. Let's go to Westmont. So Westmont, we really had 2 areas. Really. We had Casino Road, which is this, and actually it includes all the way outside of Westmont. I just included Westmont because the bulk of it was in Westmont. And we have the 526 Bowen Freeway. I think someone mentioned this in Evergreen, that area right there, Evergreen and Westmont. And so, any thoughts of this particular area?
I believe they should be made a core area, the 4 of those. The population is over 17,000, and they have the 526 on one side and 99 and
So that's Evergreen, Cascade
Evergreen
View.
on the other, and I think
The
it,
Evergreen, Cascade View, Westmont Hall, and Holly? Are you, those
From
are 4?
the notes that you guys provided, it looked like Casino Road itself should be a core area, and whether that encompasses all of the surrounding areas, I'm unsure, but that was something that everyone highlighted and discussed the different challenges and beautiful things about that area. So
Yeah, I think if you had Evergreen, Westmont, and at least Cascade View, that would encompass all of Casino Road.
and cores don't have to be full neighborhoods either. They can just be that road or that one neighborhood or that one park or however you guys see it happening, just to remind you as we move forward.
that's Evergreen. Evergreen way
Yeah.
bifurcates those 4, yeah.
So if I'm hearing this correctly, and I think I am, is that we're not talking about creating a core, while Westmont may be a core in and of itself, it would be separate and distinct from, say, Casino Road.
Could be.
It would most likely encompass Casino Road, at least a sizable amount.
Oh, okay.
Recognizing that Casino Road extends past that.
I stand corrected then.
Yeah, I think we're looking at Cascade View, Westmont, and Holly being a core neighborhood, right? Is that what we're, and,
I
you know,
would come back to Casino Road being the core.
By itself.
However, it goes across different neighborhoods. That to me is a core. Because when you start to drift over to Cascade View, Twin Creeks, the mall to me is a core.
Twin Creeks is on the other side. I think Twin
yeah.
Creeks and Silver Lake should be pulled away from that area altogether. We're on the other side.
Yeah, I'm just proposing to try and stay with the idea of Casino Road being the core, and we
Okay.
work around that however we see fit.
So that would be Cascade View, Westmont, and Holly would be around the Casino Road area. Those would be the ones that would be there.
But for this conversation's sake or this nailing down, are we saying that Casino Road is the core, or are we saying that all of those neighborhoods surrounding Casino Road together make the core? I'm hearing 2 different things, and so I just want some clarification there.
I'm saying that Casino Road is a core
By itself.
by itself.
Yes, but Casino Road goes into Cascade View
Yes,
and is in Westmont.
And in Holly as well.
But it doesn't have to be the full neighborhood. So we could just have Casino Road be the core of that area or not. But that is, I'm hearing 2 different things.
So the core will be a part of a district, but because it's a core, you're not going to break that section up in multiple districts.
Right.
Correct, and I think that's the point of Casino Road being a core by itself.
Correct. Now, let me just say that it may not be conducive to make the entire Casino Road because it may split precincts. And so that's something that should be decided at a later date, once we get it. But right now, I guess I'm hearing Casino Road should be a core, or if it's in Westmont, Westmont should be a core. And then later on, as we begin to develop the plan, we'll decide the detractions, if you will, of having the entire Casino Road included there. So either Casino Road, it sounds like, or Westmont as a core.
I'd propose Casino Road. We've been talking about that since day one, and 3 people, it looks like, listed that. So I think that'd be a great core to have. That's what I would suggest.
So if there's no strong opposition to doing Casino Road as a core, let's do a quick vote. So all in favor of making Casino Road a core, raise your hand. Okay.
So that's 7. We're doing really good, you guys.
Chris, does that include Cascade View?
Now, I think I might have skipped Pinehurst, which is over here. And so we have 2 suggestions. We have Broadway, south of Southern Pinehurst Valley View, which is the Broadway portion. And then we have Madison, between Colby and Broadway was another suggestion right here, this area right here. So this is Pinehurst Beverly Park.
I can see Pinehurst as being a core and being including Valley View. I actually live in Valley View, and the only thing distinctive about Valley View is it might fall off the cliff. But so I would just say yes, that Pinehurst Beverly Park should be a core.
Agree?
Okay. Any strong opposition or any more discussion we want to have on that area? Yeah.
We haven't mentioned Glacier View, which is just to the north of there. And I'm wondering if they sort of, I mean, I would agree with Pinehurst being the core, and maybe Glacier View is like homes, I mean, like area. So Pinehurst, yeah.
You're talking adjacent
Yeah.
areas that would be absorbed by
Yeah.
the core. So we're
yes,
getting in
I
the
agree.
weeds.
Pinehurst.
So we're pointing out cores, not necessarily neighborhoods, because we didn't talk, Bayside is not a core, nor is Riverside a core. And we didn't talk about either one of those neighborhoods. So when I'm saying that Pinehurst would be a core, it may encompass Glacier View, and in much the same fashion that it may encompass South Forest Park. But that's the point that I'm making, is not trying to create the neighborhoods themselves.
Yeah, all the neighborhoods are very unique and very important, and they all have their own identity, which is what makes this process so hard. And we don't want to leave anybody out. So this is just our first draft. So anyone who's at home who might feel like we didn't discuss their neighborhoods, it's not because we don't love those neighborhoods. So right now we have 7, correct? And so I'd like to just pull and see if there is anyone who has a strong core that we feel like we're missing, because we need to move on to next steps, and then we want to discuss.
Silver Lake.
Thank you. So can
The
we move
biggest-
on to
the
Silver
biggest
Lake?
one.
My feelings are Silver Lake should be a core. And, Twin Creek could, come in there with that, but I think it should be a core.
Silver Lake?
Because Silver Lake, yes.
Seemed like everyone kind of jumped on that. Simone, you want to do a quick fill vote for Silver Lake?
Yeah. All those in favor of making Silver Creek a core.
Lake.
Oh my gosh, Silver Lake. Oh my gosh, Silver Lake a core. I'm looking at Twin Creeks and my brain's not working. Raise your hand. Silver Lake. Okay.
Yeah, 2 different. Is there any other area that people wanted to bring up for discussion before we move on to agenda item 3?
I just want to make, sure a lot of Twin Creek reaches into that Silver Lake area. So I just want to make sure we encompass that.
And
That becomes problematic simply because of the size of those two.
But a lot of Twin Creek reaches into that Silver Lake area when you look at it and stuff, a lot of it's right there together. So if Twin Creek and Silver Lake were together,
northwest,
We need to-
1, 2, 3, 4.
And that's why I asked that question in the beginning. I think the 25,000 in Silver Lake includes county, so it's not that
But
large.
we do have 9.
there's a lot of
We have-
county area
we have
in that
9
Silver Lake
technically
area
county roads.
becomes county as you branch out. Because as you get to the Everett Bothell Highway and you go across over there, a lot of that becomes the county area. It's not city at all.
Tony, can you look at the graphic tells us that the neighborhoods of Silver Lake are 25,000, and Chris just said that includes part of Snohomish County. That isn't
That's correct.
that isn't the actual population of our Silver Lake, those residents that live in the city of Everett, Chris, is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Yes,
Tony confirmed that
That
earlier.
is the entire neighborhood of Silver Lake. So it doesn't just include the city area.
What is the population, just for our work, so that when we sit down and look at our information, what is the population within Everett that's in the Silver Lake neighborhood?
I haven't looked at that yet. I can look at that in a month.
Yeah, I'll write that down, Jim, and we'll send that out to you after we debrief tomorrow, and we'll get that information out to you.
Yeah, that's important.
Okay, are there any other core areas we think we need to discuss or add?
Well, we have two other ones that are left, and one is the industrial area here and the Everett Mall right here.
Everett Mall is a part of Twin Creek.
Yes. And so the industrial area logically would be maybe a potential core. However, we made this a core, these three neighborhoods, and therefore it may be a problem. But we can still make it a core, then make some decisions later.
So
So we have 8.
9, because we made Rucker Hill and downtown 2 separate cores. So that was 1 vote, but 2 cores were incorporated in that field vote. So I have Northwest, Delta, Rucker Hill, downtown, Lowell, Boulevard, Bluff, Seahurst, and View Ridge as 1. Casino Road, Pinehurst, Silver Lake.
Oh, I didn't have Pinehurst.
We didn't formally vote on Pinehurst.
Oh, we didn't?
Do we want to vote on Pinehurst? Do we still want to consider that a core? Is there an, yeah? Okay. All those in favor of making Pinehurst Beverly Park a core, raise your hand. Okay.
Thank you. So that is 9.
So after this, the only thing that, in my mind, that is left is Cascade and Twin Creeks. Am I mistaken?
I feel like Bayside and Riverside was to be discussed as well. We kind of jumped ahead a little on those.
Cascade View was put with Westmont. Isn't that what we did? Wasn't Cascade View put with Westmont and Holly? And Twin Creek was with Silver Lake.
Coming back to Bayside, we incorporated that as part of downtown. Yeah,
Yeah.
that it's a business district as opposed to Rucker Hill being residential.
Okay, so that makes sense for that west side. So then the other question was Riverside. So if there isn't a strong core there, then we're good.
So if there's no strong core, like Chris said, for Riverside, then I think we move on to next steps, Tony. And then we come back to this conversation at our next meeting when we have some more input. So let's move on to agenda item 3.
Okay, our next step, if we look at the plan development process, I put together somewhat of a suggested approach that we use, and some sort of suggested target timeline. I don't know if I want to go over all of it because I think we just don't have time. But it's suffice to say that our next step would be, once we finalize the core areas, would be to present these to what you would call some jurisdictional experts inside the city. That would be legal entities or legal departments, the planning department, coming from a legal point of view and a planning point of view. Do these core areas make sense? Do they have any suggestions? And then the third entity would be the Council of Neighborhoods. And the rationalization for that is it's better to begin to reach out to the community sooner versus later, and check the pulse of that. And this is a useful way, or a way, let's say, to begin to bring in ideas and concepts from outside of the bubble of the city government and the commission. So we will propose the areas that we come up with, the finalized areas. We'll also propose them to those 3 entities, get feedback, and then we'll incorporate that in our decision making of what are the final 5. Now, we may not come up with 5, maybe it'll be 6. But we'll have to pick 5 of the 6 or 5 of the 7 for each of the plans that we're going to develop. So out of those 5 core areas, we'll then begin to expand and create districts, full district plans based upon those core areas. And as I said before, we'll have multiple plans most likely. We then review those plans, debate them back and forth, and then come up with a set of 1 or more plans that we want to propose to the public and forums. We then would, of course, submit the input from the public forums to actually finalize the final development plan and then vote on by November. So that's sort of a thumbnail sketch of process. I do want to say, and I didn't include it in here, with these district cores comes a rationale of why they should be core. So one of the things that I think we are going to need to do is to take those district core areas that we come up with and actually integrate why they should be core areas. What's special about them? And I think you all have said some of those things tonight. And so I think if we send those out, once we finalize it, we can get some input, and then we can sort of collate it all together in a list. And this is prior to us showing it to any entity that's outside of the commission.
So to summarize, we'll take these 10, make a clean map that highlights these 10. We'll send that to legal, send that to planning, go to the Council of Neighborhoods, solicit input, see what their feedback is. I'll submit that to Tony. We'll make a nice recommendation document that either explains why these are great choices, or some speaking points or conversations that we missed that we should have. Reconsider our 10, narrow it down to 5, and then move forward with our first drafts of maps. So if everyone is okay with that process, then I'd like to move forward with that unless there are some objections or a conversation that needs to happen.
I'm strongly in favor of that, just because I think we need to start somewhere with gathering our outside input. And I think starting with the Council of Neighborhoods gives us a big enough group, but also small enough and group of people that understand kind of what we're doing to kind of really perfect how we're going to go out and get that community input. I think it's really important that we kind of have not a test subject, but a time to test that out.
So when you say going out to the council of neighborhoods, you don't mean going out to
No, individual.
Correct.
individual neighborhoods,
not
just
in-
go out to the leadership here?
Yes.
They meet on the fourth Monday of the month, and so it would be going to that meeting, right?
Right.
So, Tony is in the next step then, will you be visiting with the jurisdictional professionals and explaining as you go through, as you did with us this evening, the expectation and what you would like them to focus on, as well as with the neighborhood organization? How do they get their direction in terms of what their work should be and what you expect from them?
I would do it. So I would facilitate the conversation with the Council of Neighborhoods. Tony would draft up a nice one-pager for me, so I have speaking points that would go out to our legal department and our planning department. And then I would facilitate the meeting with the Council of Neighborhood, collect their input, provide that back to Tony, and then he would take that information and create something that we could use to further our discussion at this table.
And I'd be happy to go to that too as like our representative for the commission.
Great, and Chris
And
and
anyone
anyone
else who's
else.
welcome-
Yeah,
is welcome, of course.
absolutely.
Do we want to, I don't know, it seems like we're a little informal here. I mean, departments such as these things, do we want to be more specific if we're taking a vote on taking that as a specific action and providing information to
Yeah,
departments and people?
that would be wonderful if you had more places you wanted us to go, or if you wanted to make a motion that specified those three, or do we want to open it up bigger? That's your choice. We just have about 30 days to get through this, so we just need to narrow it down quickly.
Yeah, I suspect we were on the verge of making a motion and approving this plan, so I'm just suggesting that we be very specific about it. Is it those three things, or are there anything else?
Well, based upon that, then I am going to say something before the discussion, because I am in receipt of the two emails that Nicole, sent out earlier this week. And it seems that if we're going to the Council of Neighborhoods to get citizen input or to get further input, then we also have to entertain the ad hoc group that has already contacted this body through you, hopefully through you, and on multiple occasions, we have to at least, if we're going to go to the Council of Neighborhood, I think you also need to add them to the group in some form or fashion.
I think that the Council of Neighborhoods represent everyone in this city. I think it's out there, and that the ad hoc group, some of them, they should belong to some of the neighborhoods that we have here. And I think we need to keep it there. That was the agreement we would do, and then we would take it further out after we had come together with everything. But I think that's as far as we need to go, is with the Council of Neighborhoods, and everybody is represented there. Because it seems like right now that people are going out and talking to people in the community and bringing back that input right now. And I think this thing is going to become very contentious, and we're going to have a problem. We can't satisfy everyone, but we have to make sure we consider the citizens of this city and think about the fact that we're all human beings and we all have a right to be represented. And I'm really, really concerned about gerrymandering right now.
I think that's a valid point. You know, if we are very specific about formal bodies having this review, it is legal, it is the planning department, it is the Office of the Neighborhoods. Those are formal groups, and that's who we should stick with. So I agree with you.
Perhaps I'm misunderstanding who the Office of Neighborhoods are. Maybe I'm thinking that the Office of Neighborhoods are just people regular citizens. If I'm mistaken, and they are a formal body of people, then yes, I'm even more so saying, more strenuously saying that yes, that we should be able to get some input from this ad hoc group.
So I think right now think we've kind of all said our piece. So I think it's probably time, unless we want more discussion on this, to do a vote. Do we want to talk about this more? It seems like we've all kind of have very clear.
Kari or Chris or Jim, do you have input on this? I feel like we should hear everyone's opinion on this before we move forward, unless you don't have an opinion on it, in which case that's okay too.
Council of Neighborhoods is a formal body to the city. It's an identified thing. I would say, and this is probably in the discussion, but I did attend the Council of Neighborhoods meeting last week, and it is clear to me that there's just a lot of misinformation, uninformation. The populace of the city doesn't know what we're doing and how far we are in the process, and it would, I think, behoove us to communicate that in a more informal way. I mean, we're talking about bodies here, the legal and all that kind of thing, but at the same time, I think just a little note out to the world would be really nice, because I was there, I looked around the room, and I was the only member of this group at that event, so I was able not to have a meeting. But really, I gave them a base. We're so at the beginning of this process, but they don't know that. And so I did offer Simone as a guest to go to them, and I think that's great because honestly, they just don't know. So I know we're not quite to the point where we're communicating or public comment. I'm trying to figure the balance of that. I just think that there needs to be some sort of communication, and maybe that is one-sided for now with where we are and solicit feedback back, however that comes, written or what have you. I don't think we're to the point where we need to have a public forum totally, because we're not there. We are not there. So
I'm definitely not disagreeing with you, what you just said, but there needs to be some communication going to a larger body of people, even if it's only one way, so that whereas we may not get feedback, but we at least impart some information to them so that they know that if there are some formal objections to anything that is said, that may come in a written form, and this entire body could address it. Then it doesn't have to be a public meeting.
So
These are televised, right?
these are televised. We have a website. Everything, all of the material that you have is put on the website. All of the meetings are also so you can watch them later on the website. We do every I don't know how many weeks it is. We do like a Facebook. Here's the link to that. Everything is accessible. It's just I don't think people quite know where to go to find it, and so that's something that I met with the communications team on, and we are working on trying to solve that problem because I have heard that it is one, even though the information is there. It's just like where do I go to find it? So that's hard. But I think that the conversation comes back to if we open this up to smaller or special interest groups or groups like that, does that also mean we have to visit 38th District Democrats, the Republican groups? Does that mean we need to go to all the neighborhood groups to solicit feedback? What is fair? Where do we start that line? Where do we end that line? And what is my instruction when I leave this meeting today?
I think that I'm being misunderstood here. What I said was that we need to communicate to everyone in a smaller synopsis form. I attend these meetings, and I don't believe I've missed a meeting yet. And there are some times where I walk away confused. And it is great that when I go through and read those minutes afterwards so that I could fully understand what did I actually vote on. And that's exactly what I'm saying too, that if it's only in one direction that we give this information, maybe it is that one page understanding that everybody can have access to and not have to sit up and listen to an hour and a half of me blabbing because sometimes, well, we rather than force people to listen to an hour and a half, give them that executive summary. And that is the message that I'm saying. I'm not saying that we go out and have public meetings.
You
So
know,
I think-
people find what they want to find. When we want to find something, we find it. And so I think that when we made some discussions, we've talked about this a lot, and I thought we had come to a consensus on how we wanted to handle this. And everyone agreed, and it was not one time, but several times that we've discussed it. And I just know that if you're looking for something and you really want to find it, you can find it.
Agree with you, Ethel, agree. Nicole, you said that you received the letter, and you're apparently working with the communication staff. And as I look at the request, they would like your communication staff to prepare an update in the city newsletter. I suspect you're doing that. They are interested in looping in some associations. We apparently this evening are bringing in the neighborhood association. And as Ethel just said, and others, they're welcome to attend that meeting. They'd like a press release in terms of the district master. And I guess we've done, I don't know what we've done along those lines. In terms of the handout, it's early. We're not ready yet. Kari said that. The coffee hour and those, we're going to have 4 or 5 or 6 of those at some point.
And the mayor does go to the senior center and provide quarterly updates. So she's given 2 that include districts to date that are at the senior center. So those coffee hours have already happened.
Well, I think we can move on if somebody has a motion to.
So council, I'm hearing council,
I'd
so
call
it's
for-
okay, council,
like-
neighborhood planning and legal?
Yes, I'd like to call for the question.
So I was just gonna say, so as Ethel, I think, is alluding to, we've, since the beginning, decided that we were not soliciting public feedback at this time until later on in the process, and there's a clear distinction between communication and specifically asking for feedback, which is what we're talking about here. And so that's why I raised the question of who specifically are we talking about doing this, and we all need to agree on that. Personally, I'm fine with legal and planning, probably at any stage of this. I think with Council of Neighborhoods even, and no offense to them, I'm a part of that, you're flirting with involving the public. And that does raise the question, well, what about this other group and this other group? So I think that almost needs to be a separate vote.
And the reason why we want to include the council neighborhoods is because we have to start somewhere, and we felt like that would be a good group to start with. Once we expand out further, we get into issues of access. You know, if we open up just people to be able to come in and give comment here, that's a big access issue. Not everyone can do that. So once we get to the point where we really want to talk about that, that's obviously a whole different conversation. But for now, if there's no major opposition, which it seems like we have a pretty good majority right here that are in favor right now of this as is, I think we should vote.
When you say we, you keep saying we.
We?
Yeah, you said we in the council, we decided on the council of neighborhoods. Are you meaning us here, or when you?
No, I ran the whole agenda by Simone before the meeting today, and
There's been conversation, and people have kind of agreed to that.
yeah, just I go through the agendas with Simone before every meeting so that our chair is prepared. But one thing that Tony had said, and Tony, if you're still there, you can chime in at any time, is that if we have a slow start to start bringing in, start with the Council of Neighborhoods and expand from there, it kind of gives us that ability to say that we've inquired with the public, we've gotten some insight, we know that we're going in the right direction. Because if we come to a point in this process where we are completely missed the mark and all of the feedback comes back, well, you should have, that's going to be difficult as well. And I'm comfortable with whatever you guys decide. I think that, that's great. But I just did want to say that was when we were talking about giving public feedback, we had heard that you're not ready to get public comment, but where does that public feedback start, and how can we do it in a way that we feel is productive at this point in the process?
Absolutely. The concept of the Council of Neighborhoods is that these are formal entities that represent the neighborhoods throughout the city. And so they're citizens, but they're not just lone citizens outside of the city just by themselves. They're collective neighborhoods. They represent a neighborhood. And so by going to them, it is interjecting public input and interjecting it sooner versus later. Like I said in the beginning, I think it's good to somehow get public input sooner versus later. Or once we reach the forums, we will get feedback that says, well, how come you all did not come to us earlier? And then we can say that we went to the Council of Neighborhoods and we solicited it and we got feedback. Inside this, I also included that after we develop a plan, we actually go back to the same entities. And so we do it at the courts, but we also do it with the multiple plans as well. And then we bring it to the forums. So we can say that we had twice we actually reached out to the community and got feelings, their input rather, from those neighborhood associations.
So I'm totally.
So it is a compromise, as Weber would say,
So-
between actually trying to reach out to the public completely now versus not at all.
Yeah, so I totally understand and agree, Tony. I think we all like the idea of getting input. And I think the Council of Neighborhoods is a reasonable start on that. I just am concerned and raising it not as an objection, but we just need to make sure that we're not on a slippery slope and we don't get a lot of, well, why that group and not this group? That's my whole point. So we just need to be mindful of that and vote on it.
Right. Point taken. Very good.
Tony, in your previous districting, redistricting, et cetera, at this point in time, are these the groups that you have approached in plans you've already done? Legal, planning, council, of neighborhoods, as that may exist in other locales? Or were there more that you solicited early on for feedback?
Usually, of course, if it's a city, you would want to touch on legal all the time. You would want to actually broach legal just to make sure things are legal. Planning is a logical source because they theoretically are the experts of this particular city, for neighborhoods, for populations, for where there's growth. I mean, theoretically, they're the experts for the city and how it's progressing and moving. The neighborhood association is a logical choice, as I said before, because they're citizens. They're made up of actual citizens. The only other entity would be entities that I would think that actually touch on other citizenry. And right now I can't come up with any of those. I think these are sort of well-rounded areas. We've got some that we want to make sure that it's legal. We've got one piece or second part to make sure that we have some expertise in the city and bring that to the table. And then we have the citizens via the Council of Neighborhoods to bring that input. So I think it's a holistic approach. At this moment, I can't think of anything else.
Thank you.
Good question.
I'll set aside Council of Neighborhoods and split that decision off and make a motion that we supply this information for feedback to the legal and planning departments.
Second?
Okay, all in favor? So we'll go around. We actually have to do a voice vote.
Jim Langus,
Yes.
Ethel McNeil,
Yes.
Chris Garai,
Yes.
Ben Young,
No.
Julius Wilson,
No.
Kari Kwas,
Yes.
John Monroe,
Yes.
Simone Tarver.
Yes.
So we have a majority.
And then I'm moved to also supply this information to the Council of Neighborhoods to seek feedback from them.
Second?
Okay, all those in favor will go back around the table.
Jim Langus,
Yes.
Ethel McNeil,
Can I ask a question first? I have a question before we vote. Is that,
yeah, I don't know the,
When you say Council of Neighborhoods, is that the monthly meeting?
Yes.
Not going to individual?
correct.
Okay.
I'll clarify it and let's just revote.
Please.
So,
Yes.
I move that we, provide the Council of Neighborhoods an update at the next meeting or the next one after that. I don't know when it is.
The monthly.
The monthly meeting, the convening of the whole Council of Neighborhoods.
This should be to allow them to provide feedback on our cores,
Yeah.
not just provide an
Yeah.
update. So
Provide update and, to get feedback from the Council of Neighborhoods to the whole convening to at their next, meeting.
do you have a second?
Yes, second.
Simone Tarver,
Yes.
Jim Langus, Ethel McNeil,
Yes.
Chris Garai,
Yes.
Ben Young,
No.
Julius Wilson,
Yes.
Kari Kwas,
Yes.
John Monroe,
Yes.
Simone Tarver.
Yes.
Did I get you twice? Good.
Just count me just once.
I'll count you once. Okay, so that is also a majority. Ben, would you like to say anything? Okay. So then, final item is discussion items. Oh, Chris, sorry.
One more question. I feel like we're the majority of the way through that first bullet. Tony, do we need to wait till March to move on to that step of getting feedback?
I think the audio went out, so I think.
I can actually answer that. So Tony and I discussed if we got through 10 today, that we would go to the Council of Neighborhoods this month and get that feedback and turn it around as fast as we can to have it ready for you at the next meeting so that we could move forward. So since we didn't end up with 14 today and we have 10, we should be able to move through getting that feedback and producing something by the next meeting.
So the next Council of Neighborhoods meeting, you said it's the fourth Monday? So that'd be the 24th?
Yep, and that would give us just a little bit of time to
February 24th.
wrap around, but we'll be able to do it.
No,
So-
the Council of Neighborhoods.
I remember 9. I don't remember the 10th one.
Oh, yeah, Sorry,
That's
we
what
have
we have to
9.
talk about
The
that
deal that
next.
Tony and I had was if we had 10 or less, we'd be able to turn it around by the next meeting. So we have 9. Sorry, Ben.
Okay, so we're moving on to discussion items. Does anyone have anything?
Just the community input part, we already talked about that. I just wanted to address the letters that we had received and make sure I brought everyone's attention to those and see if anyone had feedback. We kind of went through that in our last item, so I feel good unless there's something else people need to discuss.
March meeting, but we can talk about that after whatever the discussion item is.
I was just going to say it's the communication front again. I think it just needs to be reiterated that somehow in all of our busy lives and schedules, it is very difficult. I can't watch every planning meeting. I can't watch every city council meeting. So some sort of one-page summary of we've hired our districting master and this is where we are in the process, I think seems a very reasonable communication to the greater city. And I would think through city mediums, a news flash, maybe something in the paper or ask someone to cover it. I don't know. I just feel like the more casual conversation around it, just to like, hey, by the way, this is going on, because people just don't know. I mean, they just don't know, or they come at me personally with questions that just, what? No. We're not there yet. Nothing's been decided. We're still working through. So some sort of piece, if the city could help with that, we could do. I mean, if you want sentences from us or quotes or what have you, I just think a simple communication to update everybody would be awesome.
I think I can do that on our website and make our website that one pager and just pull those updates and then re-update those as we move forward with the big ticket items instead of having the full summary up there. I could probably do that easily.
And I heard what I heard her say was that there should be multiple means of doing that, and it shouldn't just be something that you post on our website, because it should be multiple means of doing that one page, or where you can use the newspaper, you can use the Everett. It may be something that says, hey, see the latest. It may be some piece of flash that's on the screen when somebody hits the city of Everett that says, see the latest on the Everett District and Committee. Something that is not, something that will attract people to go and read it, because right now, if we're relying simply upon people that are interested in districting because it's something that they've been watching for, we're going to have that challenge no matter what come the end of this if you don't start getting it out there besides, because it just needs something else, some more communication than just something on a website.
I will definitely continue to meet with our communications team and come up with a strategy to better the communication. Also, we have done press releases. We have reached out to media outlets. It's not picked up. That's not something that I can fix, but I will come up with a strategy that will satisfy the conversation that I heard here tonight. So I will send it out to you. We will improve.
And we should keep in mind this is the first time, we're the first convening of this type of effort. So we should make sure we have a little bit of grace with our staff. They're figuring it out as much as we're figuring it out. And granted, yeah, there are other commissions and other efforts. This is the first time this exactly is being done. So I would say for a first time effort, I think we're doing great. I think we have a great group of people here, great staff. And, I think we're going to get this done, well, in record time because no one's done it before. So we do need to talk about March meeting. Should we stick with our same schedule, which is like the first Monday? So that'd be March 2nd. Does that work well for everyone?
Yeah, I
know it doesn't work for
great.
one person.
If we could just do the first Monday of every month from now until the end of the year, and we can add meetings as needed or take them away if not, but just plan on the first Monday of the month from now until November would be wonderful.
That works for me for every month except for April. I know I will be in DC in April, so, and hopefully, I'm actually trying to be in Paris on the 1st of June, but we'll see how that works out.
Jealous, but okay. So I will vote on that. So all in favor of planning out the rest of the year. So first Monday of the month here, 6 to 7:30. All those in favor will go around the table.
We need a second.
I was going to say second.
Cool.
Simone Tarver,
Yes.
Jim Langus,
Yes.
Ethel McNeil,
Yes.
Chris Garai,
Yes.
Ben Young,
Yes.
Julius Wilson,
Yes.
Kari Kwas,
Yes.
John Monroe. Okay, great.
Perfect. So if there's nothing else anyone else wants to chat about, I move to adjourn. Okay, all in favor, raise your hand. All opposed? Okay, we're adjourned.